Get ready.
Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of Trace Coronas. This week we are in San Diego at the Orion Ascent conference, and we have with us Jorge Romero from Dynasty Family Office.
Hi everyone.
Glad to have you.
Thanks for having me.
The whole theme of Orion Ascent is unstoppable, so today we're going to talk a little bit about what makes an advisor unstoppable. So first things first, client communication expectations are constantly changing. So Jorge, what is one way that you are managing those expectations and kind of moving with the times?
We try to be very proactive. Generally try to meet the client in the medium that they're most comfortable with. You know, a lot of clients are pretty good with email. Others might prefer more text. Of course, it has its own compliance challenges at times, but you know, we use technology to bridge those gaps and stay compliant. But ultimately, you want to meet the client in the medium that they're most comfortable with, because ultimately that's going to get the highest engagement. We do a lot of proactive communication, whether it's, you know, what's happening with your portfolio or what's happening in the market. And a lot of times just little nuggets of wisdom, especially around like tax time right now. Hey, you know, little tips and tricks, things like that, you know, are contemporaneous to what's happening. The idea for us is to really be ahead of the game, not wait for the client to ask the question, but really try to proactively anticipate the question and provide some thought leadership so that they know that we're thinking about the issues that they might be having.
Yeah, absolutely. Do you find that there's one communication method that is more common than others that clients prefer, or is it just kind of all over depending on the client?
I think for the most part, email tends to be pretty well received. I think it gives folks the ability to read it on their time. We have a pretty high click-through rate on email, so I would say email.
Johnny, what about you? What would you recommend to financial advisors to kind of deal with all the changes that come?
Yeah, so I mean, I think, George, you nailed it on the head when you were talking about just being proactive and building that relationship. Like, I think you want to leverage digital channels as much as you can. Like you're talking about email, you want to leverage though in person, like nothing. I think, you know, in person meaning just face-to-face communication. It could be over Zoom, it could be in the office, but yeah, I just think that there's no replacement for like personal communication. Like you can scale that to a certain degree, but you can't ever, you know, replace that personal relationship creation.
Yeah, and I think clients also appreciated being authentic, even if in an email. I think that they know the way you write, they know the way you speak, and that has to show if you're going to email. If you're copying and pasting something that's going to cookie cutter, it's going to come across that way. It's going to sound inauthentic because it looks like it literally came off, you know, some printing press. And so ultimately, I think the way you deliver the message is as important as the message itself. I'm supposed to be drinking this.
Yeah, take a sip. We'll drink. All right, so a big topic at Orion Ascent this year is behavioral finance. So what role do you guys think behavioral finance should play when you're marketing yourself and your firm?
I think it's critical. I mean, I think we're moving away from advisors really just providing portfolio construction. That's something that's become commoditized. Technology has been able to, you know, create different fintech tools that can provide advisors the right optimal portfolio. And, you know, you can get into the nitty gritty of all the math of an optimal portfolio. But bottom line is clients are not really looking for that as much as they're looking for coaching. In terms of the behavioral finance, you know, especially with retirees, it's a lot about controlling, you know, sequence or return risk, which is just a fancy way of saying, hey, you're withdrawing from your portfolio and markets get volatile. There might be you know, kind of a fear-driven decision to sell and get out. And as we all know, that's generally the worst thing that you can do. So I think advisors serve a client best when they're able to engage with them, understand, you know, their personality traits, you know, risk tolerance, all these things that are pretty standard and table stakes, but ultimately be able to deliver a process that focuses on, you know, addressing the anxiety that clients may have. And that anxiety is, again, largely behavioral in many dimensions.
Yeah. I think too, like from a marketer's perspective, we know that emotional language is more effective than just pure facts and figures. And, you know, we know that painting that picture of that future state of success for a client, that solutions-based marketing is what resonates. So I think behavioral finance just so naturally flows into just what good marketing is. So
Yeah, agreed. I generally tell folks that there's two correct answers. There's the mathematically correct answer. I can pull out spreadsheets and, we can measure it to the 10th degree. But then there's also the answer that makes you sleep better at night. And sometimes that might seem counterintuitive to textbook, planning. But ultimately, the best tools and the best solutions and properly implemented will yield the worst results. And so you do have to take into consideration the client's behavior and, their MOs in terms of being able to tailor advice to them as well.
Absolutely. I think a lot of people look at money as like hard numbers, but it's such an emotional topic for a lot of people. It goes back to, what our podcast Money Chronicles is about. You grow up with these views of money that you may or may not realize are influencing the way you're making decisions as an adult. And just using that to better understand your clients and to better position yourselves in front of them as a person who's understanding and empathetic towards their situations is going to get you way further than if you're like, here's the number, here's the stats, which like, that's great and you need it, but like you really need that emotional piece as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Long ago, a mentor of mine said you have two ears and one mouth for a reason. Listen twice, speak once.
Yeah.
And you certainly, have to listen and pay attention and ask deep, thoughtful questions. Mm-hmm. I think too often advisors want to get into, the cool stuff like, hey, what's your risk tolerance? And here's the solution. But ultimately, if you take the time, if you're empathetic and you start to listen, you do hear some of these stories. You do start to understand what I would consider their money history. Why do they have the values and the views that they do, whether it's adversity towards debt or whether perhaps it's risk aversion. And what you'll find is that there are emotional components and experiences that folks have gone through that you have to take into consideration because, again, you could be looking at someone who is in a great financial position. They have the right resources. Statistically, they're never going to run out of money. And yet ultimately they have some anxiety. And they might be, analysis paralysis because ultimately there's something there in their history that you need to be able to understand, to be able to relate, to then be able to provide the right advice and coaching to make your advice and, actionable steps meaningful.
So very on theme with this week, but what would you say makes an advisor unstoppable?
I would say is their ability to be empathetic. A lot of times consumers won't seek advice because they feel like, they might be judged, like they feel like they may not be doing things right. And that ranges the spectrum, from folks who are building wealth to folks who have a lot of wealth. Ultimately, an advisor is unstoppable when they can, listen to the client, understand them, really look at it from a multidimensional point of view. It's not just about portfolio construction. It's about managing a life cycle of wealth, looking at it multi-generationally as well. A lot of times you'll find that, folks have, family members, whether it's children or other related members that, they have concerns about and, how their wealth will be inherited might be a component of that. So you really need to stop and listen and focus on what clients' needs are beyond what they're telling you, because they're not always going to be very good at telling you, hey, here's my problems. You kind of have to play a little bit of psychologist and kind of peel back the layers of the onion.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I'm going to just echo what you say in marketing too. Like the buzzword for marketing is authenticity, but authenticity without empathy kind of lacks everything. So I think the more that in your marketing you can just bring out externally those internal practices and that way that the client experience is shaped by the firm and that empathetic type of relationship being built, that's where marketing wins.
Absolutely.
Yeah, agree.
Well, Jorge, it was great having you on the show. Thanks for being a part.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah. We will see you guys in 2 weeks. Bye.
Bye.